I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the CULTWORTHY. I'm your host, Antonio, and I've got a very special guest today, a local guest. And even though she's local, she's not in studio today, but we'll fix that in the future. Please welcome Rachel of Rachel's Reviews, and Rachel reviews everything.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to connect with a fellow Utahn. It's very cool.
Right. And this is the thing. You were recommended to me by my friend David, who does the Piecing It Together podcast. He's based out of Las Vegas.
Yeah, good friend.
Yes. And I was like, oh, how have I not spoken to her? She's literally 30 minutes down the road from me, because I've been following you for a while on social media, and I didn't realize that you were Utah until I started seeing like the Hale Center Theater reviews and things like that. I'm like, oh, she is local. So yes, let's get this conversation going. So let's do that. Let's find out. I know you do so much, so I would rather you describe what you review. How do you find the time to review it?
You know, the people talk about, oh, you should have like a balanced life. That is not me. I definitely don't have any balance. I am pretty much always doing something, whether it be in theater or in film. I consider myself I try to be the ultimate patron of the arts. That's my goal. And almost every day I am either at a film screening or a theater production, and I love it. It's great.
I think that's one of the things that people outside of the state of Utah don't understand is how thick we are in the arts here.
I really don't think people get it. I mean, I could literally go to a quality production every day if I wanted to.
Right.
Every day.
Right. I was immersed in it as a youth. I was raised in Sundance Summer Theater, Hale Center Theater, Pioneer Theater. I had a stage mom who put me in everything. And when I was 16, I rebelled and I broke out of that. But I've still really been into movies, hence the podcast, hence all the ridiculous physical media collection behind me. So I stuck with that part of it, but I was always more of an appreciator, and I'm going to say like essayist, blogger, and now podcaster of the medium, not so much feeling comfortable in front of the camera, even though I'm on YouTube now. So yeah, I agree with you. With Utah, dance, theater, film, TV, we are completely immersed in it, and a lot of people don't recognize that. So now that I think that social media, us, I guess you could say, influencers and, you know, appreciators of the arts, I think it's getting out there a little bit more that Utah is like a hub for creativity, artistic talent, and like we're going to talk about today, film festivals.
Yes. Yeah. Hopefully we don't lose our big film festival. That's it's still it's up for debate. I think because this year the Sundance has been so odd. They only have two venues in Salt Lake, which is crazy. I mean, I remember there were like 7. And so the only thing that I can figure is that they just must not be wanting to renew contracts and stuff now, you know, when things are a little bit unsure. But I don't know, it's just very weird. But I was grateful because I was added as press this year, which I had been denied the previous 3 years. So I didn't think that they would, but I was very, very grateful for that. And this will be my 10th year attending and covering Sundance in some way. My first actual year was 2016, but I was only did one movie that year. But my first real year in going was 2017, and it's just wild how time flies.
It's something I thought would never happen. And that's kind of what this episode is about, because, you know, us being locals, and I think some people just don't appreciate the fact that we have one of the most, if not the most prestigious film festival in the country, just in our backyard. And then we've had it for what, 40 years or more. And it was getting bigger and bigger. And I've got lots of different theories of, the state of of cinema, of theaters, of theatrical releases versus streaming, almost tinfoil hat type things. But when it comes down to the festivals, there is something that I think I recognize. And it's kind of why I stopped going. So I was essentially raised with Sundance from like my early teens. My mom was part of the Park City Arts Association. So we got passes. We'd go all the time. I got to volunteer for years, serving popcorn at Egyptian theater. So my teens and early 20s, I was really heavily immersed. And then something happened, I want to say, like in the early 2000s, where it stopped being about the art and it more like became like a shopping mall for studios to pick up indie films. And it kind of lost some of the flair. Did you kind of notice that too?
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, especially when so many of these properties are basically, Netflix and
Mhm.
Amazon and, the productions. It used to be you could go to Sundance and count on seeing movies made by somebody out of their van, and now that's becoming increasingly harder and harder to find. And the ultimate was, I think it was actually 2020 that it was that was a really bad year. And I hadn't been able to get the locals pass, which I think is the only way to fest. It is by far the best way to experience the festival. And but I didn't get it that year. I was so disappointed. So I got the Grand Pass, which now they're not doing it at the Grand. I have no idea why, but I got the Grand Pass, and they made the Taylor Swift documentary the first and last of your package at the so you had 10 tickets, part of the Grand Pass. They made the Taylor Swift, and the thing that makes that even worse is that the documentary came out on Netflix that week. So I had literally 3 opportunities to see that documentary that year at Sundance. Yeah, I think it was 2020, but it's just like, are you kidding me? Like, what are you doing? And like, that's where it gets frustrating, is when it's less the shopping aspect of it and the purchasing and the hype, films get way overhyped and all that, than it is the actual like co-opting of the movies themselves.
Correct.
That these things are Netflix productions. And it just loses some of that like
Yeah,
that built the festival.
I agree. And there's also kind of like a treasure hunt mentality to it as
Yeah.
well, because, back before streaming, if a film didn't get picked up and distributed theatrically, or at least on a wide scale, if it was
Yeah.
limited release, it would end up on video or the Sundance Channel or IFC, and you had to wait or you had to find it. You had to go look for it in a video store.
Well, one of the ones I'm talking about in my memories one, it's never been released in the United States. It was even a
Crazy.
jury winner, and it's still so. There's still those movies that and it's something I always struggle with the festival is like, how many premieres do I see
Mhm.
versus the actual more unique Sundance things, because like, for example, something like Hitman this last year was a good film and I enjoyed seeing it and I was glad I got to see it in the theater. But it had already premiered, I think, at Cannes.
Mhm.
And so it already, and at TIFF, I think, and so it was just kind of going through the motions as far as the Sundance release. And the premieres, a lot of times those do get released in theaters. I know I'm going to have a chance to see them. So I don't want to use all of my Sundance time to watch stuff that I know I'm going to be able to see, but of course it's a hard thing because those are also the things that people are the most anxious for the reviews of, and you get the most hits and stuff, whereas it's like some obscure thing, nobody's going to read that or watch that. But I don't know. So it's a balance of the two in figuring out what to cover. But part of the nice thing about having the locals pass, and why I recommend it to anybody who can do it, is that when you have the locals pass, you don't have to get a ticket ahead of time. So you could literally hear about something that day, and as long as it's in Salt Lake, you go up to the front of the line you show them your pass, you're in. And so it just makes the whole experience way better than like when you have a block of tickets and you're just trying to guess, oh, is this going to be good? Is this going to be bad? And most of the time you guess wrong. Whereas like if I have the locals pass, I have a much better quality of experience because I have that flexibility of what I'm seeing and when I see it, and it also just makes the whole experience just so much more pleasant because you don't have to wait in the as long lines, and you start to. It's also nice because you can get some degree of like camaraderie between the other locals pass holders that you see over and over again. You'd be like, oh, what have you been watching? What have you been seeing? What's good? And so I just think it makes, to me, even if I didn't use it to its full extent to be worth the price, I still think the how much better the experience is. It's really worth it. Anybody who's local, I just highly recommend get the locals pass.
So, in celebration of the Sundance Film Festival, since we don't know how much longer we have it, I believe 2027 is when we're going to find out between 3 cities, and that's us, Boulder, and Cincinnati.
Yeah, who knew? Cincinnati.
That really came out of nowhere, but whatever. I think one of the things that we can kick off with this conversation is our 3 favorite Sundance memories. And I had a lot more than 3. You told me before we started recording that you had a bunch too, and you're going to narrow it down to 3. But since you're my distinguished guest, I would love for you to share your first favorite Sundance memory.
Well, I have one from just this last year, so from 2024. And it's a little documentary. This is totally random, but it's Luther Never Too Much, about the singer Luther Vandross. I would never consider myself like a diehard Luther Vandross fan. I liked him, but it just fit into my schedule. And so I was like, going to go see it. And I rarely felt like so connected to a person. And then I did through this documentary. They did such an excellent job. And it's not like when you watch it, you'd be like, it's a standard, celebrity bio documentary thing. But what I really connected to so much is that he never really fell in love. And yeah, he sung all these love songs and he was known for singing all these love songs. And I really connected with that because I've never really fallen in love, and I cover all these Hallmark movies.
You do.
Yeah. And so like, I don't know, just his story was just so moving, and I just connected with him as a human. And it's always great when you can have those moments at the cinema, and especially at Sundance.
I like the idea that you said that because I have this argument all the time with my co-host of my other show, Back to the Balcony, which is a Siskel and Ebert. It's a show based on us critiquing their critiques. So it's a retrospective, and he, is a movie critic, and I am an appreciator, and that's where we kind of have debate sometimes and discourse. Where I say that when I go into a film, I look at it from the level of appreciation of the work, of the blood, sweat, and tears. I try not to emotionally connect myself to whatever the movie's trying to give me. And he's a guy who, when he goes in a movie, if he's going to see a romance movie, well, damn it, it better be a romantic movie. If it's going to be a comedy, it better make him laugh. And to me, some of my favorite comedies are ones that are typically not known to be laugh out loud funny. I appreciate that. And that's where we have some of our best discourse. But yeah,
that's interesting that the critic is the one who's the more emotional.
Well, because he looks at it from how the audience should view the film, and I look at it as an appreciator of viewing the film. And that's where we get into some of our biggest discourses.
I have to listen to your show.
Yeah, he's like, if I'm going to recommend a film to somebody and it's a comedy and I don't laugh, then I'm not going to tell them to go see it, even if it's decent, because people sign up for a comedy to be entertained. I think he's very old school in the sense of that's how Roger and Gene kind of were. It's like, don't tell me it's a comedy and then I'm not going to laugh for 90 minutes, call it something different. Where me, it's like, oh, I take pleasure in the silence and the discomfort. Those are some of my favorite movies. So,
but yeah, I mean, I gave this documentary 3.5 stars because it is fairly by the numbers, but like it was just his life. Like I gave Luther Vandross 5 stars as a human. The documentary, and I just thought he was a really cool person, and so that was a neat experience to have.
I like that. So my first one, I'm going to take us back to 1998, and
Oh wow.
the film, I was 17 years old. The film was Tamara Jenkins' Slums of Beverly Hills. Have you seen that film?
Okay. I never have. I haven't seen that.
It's one of Natasha Lyonne's first films. Alan Arkin plays her dad. David Krumholtz plays her brother. And the significance of that movie to me is Tamara Jenkins workshopped it at the Sundance Film Lab in 1995. In 1995, I was doing a show up at Sundance Summer Theater. I was doing West Side Story, and I was just one of the backup dancers. And something happened where they needed an actor right away to play a kid in a workshop film. And so since I was kind of like the kid that would float around the film lab and the screen, they pulled me in. I got to be in the workshop version of this film. I was 14 years old at the time, and I didn't know that the role that I was playing was actually an 8-year-old boy. So here I am, 14, voice changing, playing the younger brother of the Natasha Lyonne character, thinking I'm doing a great job and wondering, why didn't I get considered to be in the real movie when they finally made it? So then I got to see it at Sundance. My mom got me a pass. We went into it, and I watched the film and realized that the part that I had played is literally an 8-year-old boy. And so bless Tamara Jenkins for not like kicking me out of the scene that we were shooting, being nearly twice the age of the kid I was supposed to be playing. But it all made sense. Where I was like, okay, I guess it's okay that I did not get to be in the real version of the movie because I was literally twice the age of the kid that it was supposed to be. But
Oh wow.
I remember seeing Tamara in the audience, and she didn't remember me at all because it was like a few years later. I'm like, I was Ricky in your version. She's like, oh my gosh, you were. But yeah, that's one that will always I'll remember, is that watching the movie, loving it, but also understanding the fact that I was way too old to be playing that part, and so I was okay with it.
Wow. Well, that's such a personal connection. I love it. I love it.
What's your next one?
Well, my next one, 2018 was an incredible year at Sundance.
Mhm.
That was probably the highlight. There were so many good movies that year. Leave No Trace, Eighth Grade, Won't You Be My Neighbor, Minding the Gap, Searching, just really great. There was a documentary I loved called Maiden that year. Well, another one that I loved is a movie called Butterflies. And this is a comedy directed by Tolga Karselik. And he's Turkish, the director. And it's about these three people that don't know that they're siblings, that basically find out they're siblings when their dad dies. And they get to know each other through the funeral and everything. And the thing that made me laugh the hardest about this in this movie, and it's like such a dumb joke, but I don't know, it just got me, is that so there's these chickens that have eaten this gunpowder. And so like sporadically throughout the movie at different points, the chickens just blow up, which is not how gunpowder works. I realize that, but nevertheless, it always made me laugh every time. Like they would just be like walking around, like at a very dark comedy. These three, and I guess I treasure it as a Sundance memory because I enjoyed it so much, and it has never gotten a U.S. release. I always keep looking, even though it won a jury prize and everything, and it's never gotten one, and I just really enjoyed it. So Butterflies, that is a very memorable film, to see the director there, to see some of the actors, and just laughing and laughing and laughing at those darn chickens.
It is one of those interesting things about film festivals where you are submerged in the excitement of filmmakers being able to show their work. And even if there is like a lot of hype in the viewing, it's sometimes the luck goes a different way and they don't get to see a physical release, or their film doesn't get picked up for distribution in a theater or something like that. And I've been to quite a few film festivals other than Sundance where I've seen some really great things that just never really went anywhere. And that is maybe one of the benefits of the streaming system, or things like Canopy or even YouTube, where people are just be able to release their film so someone can see it, because there are so many
Yeah, I
older
was hoping
films.
that would be more the case with streaming, but it really hasn't panned out the way that I initially hoped. Because I thought, oh, they won't have to make the physical investment that they had to make for physical media.
Right.
But it seems like it's now more times than not, it's a way to rob us of material that they've just given to us. It's already gone. It's already off of. I know director Jonah Feingold, his movie At Midnight, it's just gone. It was on
Yeah.
Paramount Plus, and now it's gone. And I can't imagine what that would feel like to just have your movie. I mean, I realized that there was always that was always something that happened, that movies went out of circulation, but like not. I mean, this movie just came out last year and it's gone. But
Yeah.
yeah, this one that has never gotten released, and I think it's sad because it's really funny. If anybody knows, if we've got any Turkish film fans, let me know, because I would love to see it again.
You know where it might be? Like, I have to ask my friends who are in the depths of Film Freeway. There's lots of people that are, like, streaming their film on those through different, like,
Yeah,
online
let me
film
know,
festivals. Yeah,
please.
I'll definitely ask them if they have a link or, like, a Vimeo link to it, and I'll send it your way.
And maybe a Karaselic has like a secret underground fandom that I don't know about. But it won like I said, it won a jury prize. Like I am surprised that it didn't get anything, like no release. Because it's a comedy. It's not like it's some heavy movie or something. But anyway, that to me is like the very emblematic of Sundance. And I always tell people, don't just go to the premieres. Don't do it. You miss out on so much.
Okay, well, speaking of premieres, one of my favorite premieres of all time, I think this was 2000, and it got a theatrical release in 2001, and that was Ben Younger's Boiler Room, starring Ben Affleck, Giovanni Ribisi, Nikki Katt, Vin Diesel in one of his first roles. I got to see that with a pass, and it became kind of like my new favorite movie of that particular era, because it was Wall Street for Gen Xers and young dudes like me. It had hip hop music. It was all about junk bonds and stuff like that. But I'm sure some of the things that you see at Sundance is like, if a movie's got maybe 3 or 4 screenings throughout the festival, if it catches buzz early, or if it's a premiere that's hot, then it's almost impossible to get into it. And then after seeing it the first time,
That's why you want the locals pass,
that's why you want the locals pass.
because then you definitely can get into it. Yeah.
Wanting to see it again and again and again, it just wasn't a thing. So I had to wait for the theatrical release for another year, and eventually on the physical media, VHS back then. And that's one of the things that, like, I love movies like that, where a director or a casting agent recognizes talent early, because, those guys, they had already shot Saving Private Ryan, some of them, but it hadn't come out yet. And so they were still kind of riding the wave of that. And then Ben Affleck, it was really just a favor to do that little, cameo to his buddy, but it becomes one of the most quotable and memorable moments of that movie. Whenever I see any clips of that movie on Instagram or on TikTok, it's always his monologue about act as if. It's essentially the Alec Baldwin role from Glengarry Glen Ross, but for younger generations. And so that for sure was probably one of my favorite premieres of all time. It was so hot. Everyone wanted to see it. And I feel like that movie's kind of been forgotten a little bit. Like, you don't hear it spoken of, because I think it was so just centric to its time. And so, I don't know, just that particular cast was so hot. It really is like a watermark for its era. And I wish it would have a comeback.
Well, my last one is a movie that I saw in 2020, so before the pandemic, and it's memorable for the movie, which I loved, but also for the panel. And that's a great part about Sundance is the panels and the immersion that you can have and really get like a personal connection with the movies is fun. But it's Dick Johnson is dead. And the director Kirsten Johnson gave one of the best panels I've ever been to. I think she had the best panel I've ever been to. She was so fun and so energetic and just moving all around the big theater of the Grand, just being so personable and so funny, and making this documentary that was so creative and unique about her dad and her coming to terms with his growing older, him coming to terms with his age, just aging in general, but also family and love, and just also very funny, very creative. And so I loved the movie, and her panel was just very memorable, and just she just commands a room. Of course, the Academy didn't nominate it because the documentary branch is completely boring, and they never go with anything that's outside the box, of course, but it is a very, very, very good documentary. We picked it that year for our Utah Film Critics Association Best Documentary.
My last one, kind of sticking to like the same kind of theme and era, is 1999, and that was Blair Witch Project when it was at
Oh
Sundance.
wow, you were there for that, huh?
Well, this is the rub. I was there for it, but I didn't get to see it. All I had was the
Oh,
opportunity to listen to people as I was serving them popcorn, how scary it was. And the buzz around the festival and the buzz in the people in the lobby is like, "They made this for $8,000, $16,000, $500." It was one of those movies that, this is before chat rooms and forums and stuff like that on the internet, really, where no one really knew the real story of what this was. And there were still people saying like, "Oh no, this was a real thing that they found. Like, this really happened." It was so fun to hear all the misinformation back then. These days it would be intentional misinformation. And I'm sure there was a lot of that at play back then, where the filmmakers are like, "Oh, if we get people to think that this was real, that we really found this thing and chopped it together and made a movie out of it," that was part of the marketing. So, yeah, I didn't get to see it there. All I got to do was hear everybody talk about it, not have a chance to see it, and have to wait for it to hit the theaters. And it is one of those things where it's like, I always say that that is one of the most influential, monumental moments in cinema history, where now we have lo-fi movies making millions and millions of dollars competing against big budget films. However, there was the juxtaposition of the rewatchability factor of that movie is not great, because it's like kind of a one-time experience. Once it gives up the ghost, there really is no reason to watch it again. And so I think in that sense, it's kind of an enigma of itself too. Even though it spawned a couple sequels and reboots, I don't think it ever really captured the magic of that initial marketing campaign and the
yeah.
release.
I've actually never seen it because I don't do well with shaky cam,
It's very
so
shaky.
I don't think it's for me. But I grew up in Middletown, Maryland, about 15 minutes away from Burkittsville. So it was like a phenomenon. Of course, we all knew about it, and everybody's coming to visit and see. And was it real? And so, even though I didn't see it, I graduated from high school in 1999,
Me too.
and yeah, so it was just like a huge thing, even though I didn't see it.
Yeah, it's it's
So
it's just one of those enigmas, and we've seen a lot of people try and recapture that again. I mean, there was a good 15 years of found footage horror movies that,
right,
we like
Paranormal
Paranormal Activity
Activity.
was the other one too. I mean, I remember campaigning for that. I signed up for that website to give my $15 to have it come to theaters. I fell for that too, and it got a bunch of sequels as well. No, I like that. I think there is something about I'm going to say, the choose your own adventure, almost personal activity to films, where you get to be involved in something, right? Where, Kickstarters is kind of like the new thing. It's like,
Yeah,
hey, we got a Kickstarter. I helped put that movie on the screen. I helped fund something. And there's a bunch of local productions here that are always looking for, completion funds and stuff like that. I think that's a lot of fun because it
It's
does
true.
bring the indie spirit back. Because, I think that the indie spirit was really overblown in the 90s. It hurt us in the early 2000s. We regained it in the 2010s with I'm going to say, the advent of studios like Neon and Focus and A24, kind of bringing that kind of spirit of film back to kind of not necessarily compete with the big studios, but coexist. The other thing that I have to say that I always kind of have the debate about is, when theaters decided to go to luxury loungers and cut the amount of seating capacity in some of their theaters, then we ended up getting Harry Potter on 10 screens, but only like 2 screens dedicated to something smaller and more significant. And I think A24 kinda helped push that back, where now, people were lining up to see the new Eggers movie. People are lining up to see the new Ari Aster movie. I felt we lost that for a while, and it's kinda coming back.
I have to give the Academy some credit too. They had a stretch there for a while. They were really celebrating smaller films.
Agreed.
When you had Moonlight, you had Parasite, you had Coda, you had Nomadland, like there everything everywhere all at once. So like you had a pretty long stretch there where and of course Oppenheimer changed that, but for a bunch of years where it was smaller, more niche kind of films that were getting nominated and even winning for Best Picture. So yeah, it's been an interesting uh last little like decade of film.
Yeah, I'd say decade for sure. I have a question for you on that aspect. W we can't deny that this is a business and that box office is always, like, the most important thing at the end of the day to at least the studios. I don't
Yeah.
think it's as important to the audiences because we will find a way to see the movie, whether it's in the theater, whether it's on physical media, whether it's on streaming. And I think that is where studios, especially the bigger ones, are struggling to figure out what their future is. Now that you have studios like Warner Brothers canceling movies and just taking the tax break, th- that kind of
Yeah.
stuff it's kills me in my appreciation for the art. But at the same time, it is a business, and I understand that. What do you think?
In my opinion, last year, as far as studio filmmaking, was incredibly disappointing.
Agreed.
In my top 30, I only had 4 movies with a budget of over $50 million, and one of those was Nosferatu, which was 50. And so, I mean, almost all the studio films were mid to disappointing for me last year. And so, I don't know. I don't know what's happening. Why? And it seems like a lot of times I was sort of that other people liked the movies a lot more than I did. So sometimes you just have tough years.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does seem like they are just missing more than they're hitting right now, and trying to gauge what people are interested in, what people want, and what makes a good film. And a lot of them feel bloated and boring, for lack of a better word. And then it's hard too because sometimes the indies can be pretentious and annoying. And I never forget when went and watched Men, Alex Garland.
Oh,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh, what a and
I
it's
agree
like
with you.
everybody in our critic circles kind of knows my opinions about things and what I like and don't like, and that they all kind of looked back at me like, oh no. She's not gonna like this, and I hated it. So it's tough. I mean, I admire anybody who invests in either theater or film because it's such a roll of the dice. I don't know if I could do it. It's
The
tough.
the stakes are so high.
It's so hard to know what people will like. I mean, I thought it was kind of a roll of the dice, like putting that much money into Avatar sequel. I thought, is it gonna be a huge flop? Like, yeah, the first one made a lot of money, but clearly I was completely wrong, and it one of the most profitable movies ever made. So it's tough. It's really hard to know kind of what people will like and what people won't like. And
I
they look at these movies, and then it becomes kind of, if they buy into the festival hype, then it becomes this bidding war, and then they end up spending more than they probably should, because it's like, oh, I got to get it over this other people.
Right, and then the returns aren't there at the end of the day in the theatrical release, which we've seen that happen before many times. A festival darling doesn't mean it's going to be on a wide scale popular and profitable. We've seen festival darlings just not do well. And I think there's a science to it. If they only hired like statisticians and mathematicians to choose how they make these movies, that's one of the things that I've talked about on my show many times too. I go back to the whole idea of like the theaters, the experience. Growing up in the 80s and the 90s and even the early 2000s, studios made more movies then than they did now. But the goal was try to make something on the low end and either double its money or at least make its money back. At least you are getting content out there that didn't cost you a lot, so it's not a big of a loss. But then we see studios like Sony putting out these Madam Webs and these Hunter movies.
But yeah, I mean, the ultimate dream is something like Napoleon Dynamite. I mean, that it gets released and becomes a phenomenon, and they're just printing money. That's the ultimate Sundance dream.
It's funny, like listening to Kevin Smith talk about that, because Clerks was that for him, and he was never able to recapture that lightning in a bottle with any of his other releases. Yeah, he's got his followers
Yeah.
and he's got his cult following, but it's really hard to see that kind of popularity duplicated in that same realm. Like they couldn't do a Napoleon Dynamite 2 and have it be as successful or popular as the first one. I think part of the fun is to see what everyone's talking about and see what everyone likes. And if you don't like it, it doesn't matter because you still spent your money to see it. You're going to be less inclined to see part 2 if you were not on the Napoleon Dynamite train. And, it being made by BYU people here, it has a very close tie to Utah and Idaho. That was one of the weird things where it's like we kind of took ownership of it. It was made by LDS people, and while that's not part of the movie, it's part of the zeitgeist, and it never, I think, got past the 2010s. I mean, John Heder for sure, he had his moments and then just kind of didn't. And I don't know if that's because he kept himself in a certain lane of film, of content that he wanted to make, but I do like that Jared Hess decided to go a different direction, like making the documentary The Murder Amongst the Mormons too. I thought that was a great documentary. Again, Netflix. I do like to see people, if they can't duplicate the fire that they had early on, taking a sidestep into something different.
Yeah, I mean, like he did that animated film. It was nominated for Best Animated Short last year. And it was like Nine Senses or something like that. Senses movie. So yeah, I mean it's a jumping off point that then they can hopefully use to get connections and use to see them doing other stuff. I mean, like Bo Burnham, 8th Grade, and then what he's kind of done with that. That's definitely somebody. Um, a couple other movies that I really loved Sundance. I would say Love and Friendship with Stillman in general. His whole career has been very Sundance forward, and I love his movies. Sing Street.
Yeah.
I still remember seeing it and just being blown away. And that's such a frustrating movie because it really should have been a phenomenon. I mean, it was kind of overtaken by La La Land, but also it was the last film that Harvey Weinstein produced, and so it just got kind of dropped. And even though he probably did very little to nothing,
Mhm.
But yet, just kind of, so it didn't get the awards push, and the fact that I'll never forgive the Academy for picking the Sting's Chair song over any of the Sing Street songs. Unbelievable. But that's definitely one of my most memorable. I loved Theater Camp. That was last year, of course, or 2023. I loved that. even though I actually didn't like the movie, it was a little exhausting. It was very memorable. Is a little movie called We Are Little Zombies.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
This is a Korean film about this band that it's not a zombie movie like at all. It's insane. At one point they get shrunken down and a character eats them, and it's crazy. But it was an extremely memorable viewing experience. Blinded by the Light, that's one that I have a very strong memory of watching that with. Ghostlight was my favorite last year. It was one of my favorite movies last year, and it was really cool because the three lead characters are played by a real family: mother, daughter, father, and they're real family, and they were there at the screening, and so that was very cool. A Real Pain, that was also a favorite of mine last year. I really loved that. I really loved a documentary called Step. This was in 2017 about the step dance team. And I kind of followed the team, and the whole team making it all year after I saw it because I loved it. And they even did like a premiere here in Utah because Utah Film Center sponsored the film. And so I got to like meet the coach and meet them. And so that was really, really cool. So those are some more that were very memorable. Minding the Gap, that was a very memorable screening. It's a great movie, and to have the director there talking about him and his friends, and that was really good. Won't You Be My Neighbor? That was the opening night premiere that year in 2018. And I actually was at the opening night. They had like hors d'oeuvres. It was very fancy, but it was just such a good movie too. So that's a very memorable experience. So those are some that stuck out to me when I was thinking about Sundance.
That's cool. I love hearing people's different experiences. And, that's why I wanted you to have your moment to talk about the later ones, because my Sundance experiences were late 90s, early 2000s. It was like a completely different era, a completely different time for Sundance, a completely different time for festivals. And I also think that COVID also really just kind of changed the dynamic of film festivals around the world. Sundance, especially, all of these virtual screenings and things like that. I think
I
that
have to
also
give
has a lot to
Sundance a
do
lot
with
of
it.
credit though, because everybody did the virtual things in 2021 and 2022. But Sundance has actually kept it up, and they have a way bigger library that's available virtually than any other festival, like at least that I've seen or attended, like way more than South by Southwest or TIFF or any place else. And that's really nice because not only do more people get to participate in the festival, but also even as a critic here or as a patron, just to be able to see some of the movies at home is really nice.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I have a question for you about like the future of, I'm going to call them like the underground film festivals. We have some here
Uh-huh.
in Utah. We got the Zions. We've got Film Quest, which is, just happened a couple months ago. That's getting bigger and bigger. What are your thoughts on the underground film festivals? Because I've heard from filmmakers that there are too many. There's an abundance. There's a lot of hoops and ladders, and also sometimes it just feels like they're just looking for any kind of entry fee, and it feels like a scam. But then there's some that feel sincere and really care about the art. What's your experience with that? Because I know that you've been to a few.
Well, I haven't been to that many small ones. Probably the smallest, and you couldn't really say it's small, is I have been to the Zions Film Festival. It was LDS Film Festival. I've been to that, and I have been to Animationist Film, which is in LA, so it's not really small, but it is a great festival. Have had some incredible experiences at Animationist Film. One of the most amazing experiences was we watched Belle, and Mamoru Hosada was there, and he introduced it, and it was the first like full movie screening I had been to since the pandemic, and it was just it's an incredible movie. It was an incredible experience. But that's a great festival. I've been to the New York Film Festival, which is obviously a large one. I've been to South by Southwest, and I've been to Sundance. So I haven't really been to a lot of these sort of things. I guess I went to what do they call it? Thumbleweeds here, the one for kids. I've been to that. And those are ones that I think that are probably more worth investing when they have like a niche. Like I
Mm.
a lot of people love Fantastic Fest
Right.
or the Overlook Film Festival or things like that because they're really satisfying a particular genre or particular type of movie, as opposed to some of these ones that do feel like they're a little bit more of a stretch. But I would encourage anybody to, because a lot of people think, oh, I can't go to Sundance, I can't go to South by Southwest, like that's it's over. But I would encourage you to look around where you're at and find the smaller ones, because there can still be some pretty good stuff, like even if there are these other things that are involved in it, like entry fees and so some, it still doesn't mean the movie isn't
Correct.
good and
I
it's
agree
not
with you.
worth patronizing. And so yeah, I would say that just because you can't go to Sundance, all hope isn't lost. I would look for one near you that you can check out and maybe just see a movie or two. And also, I was telling somebody actually today that we were talking about South by Southwest, and they were saying, "Oh, it's $1,400 to go," and I'm like, "No, that's just for a badge. Like you can still pick up individual tickets to individual screenings. So also don't like let that ticket shock scare you off, because." Uh, Almost always, unless it's like a premiere or something special, almost always there will be a wait list or some tickets available for the public at large. So don't let that worry you as well.
And also, there's a lot of South by Southwest that's just kind of like the experience of going and trying too. Like, there's a whole
Yeah, that's
cult
true.
of people that they'll carpool or hitchhike to get down there as like part of the experience of getting there and then trying to
Yeah.
get to see a movie, and then they just have stories to sell. I probably know more people that have just gone down there on a whim and maybe only seen one film, but they had the time of their life getting there, and they had the time of their life trying to see a movie and just meeting other people that were doing the same. It's almost like people that try to get into Comic-Con and can't.
It's fun to talk to people and what have you been watching? What have you seen at the festival? What do you like? And become part of a community.
Absolutely.
It's really fun.
Well, let's finish the conversation on that, the community aspect. If there's one thing I can say about your stream, your channel, with your Instagram and everything you do, is you've built a community of appreciators, of critics, and just people that want to have conversations about the arts in Utah. Theater, Hallmark movies, all of that.
That makes me happy because that's what I'm trying to do, and so it makes me happy to hear that it's coming across that way.
That's the way I see it. And
Yeah.
how did you get there? Like, what was your motivation to be like, I want to be like the vocal platform of all of these different ways of the arts are happening here in Utah? Like, where did you start with that?
Oh, that's a long. There's a long answer to a short question, but just to be brief, like I kind of joke that being a freelancer means that if something isn't my job, I find a way to make it my job,
I like that.
and so that there's part of that. There's just things I like. So well, let's see, can I talk about them? I want to talk about them. Let's do it. And where most people just go and enjoy it, I'm like, I want to share it. I want to make it part of things, and but for as far as theater, it was after the pandemic that I was just horrified to have theaters closed for like 2 years. That was just awful. And I said, I am not, this is not going down on my watch.
Right.
And I decided I was going to go see like, as much as I possibly could. I was going to support as much as I could. And that led to writing about it, which then led to me publishing about it, which then led to me podcasting about it. It's just kind of a thing. And as far as movies go, I had tore my MCL in my knee. This was in 2014, and I was just, what am I going to do? I can't move, and I'd always wanted to review the Disney canon. And so I set up my original website was called 54 Disney Reviews because that's how much there were at the time. And so that's all I was going to do. I was just going to review the Disney canon, and then I was going to be done with it. And I just really enjoyed writing about film, and writing about film led to podcasting about film, which led to Hallmark, which then led, and so just be open to opportunity and just share the stuff you love with the world. It's worth it.
Agreed. And if there's one thing I can say about, the content of yours that I've absorbed is that you're very, what's the best way to put it? You're not overly judgmental. You're not looking for spicy hit pieces on things. Like, you have an appreciation for the art and the attempt. And that's how I am too. Like, I am not a crap talking podcast about movies. There's plenty of those. If I see a movie and I don't like it, I don't bring it to the show. I might save it for a very special episode, but I figured, like, there's so much stuff out there that hasn't been seen, that hasn't been discovered, and maybe it just hasn't been appreciated the right way. Maybe when it came out, it was a bomb, but if you looked at it in today's eyes and took the whole box office poison away from it, you could actually find the entertaining values to it, and you might have a whole different insight. And that's the way I kind of look at things.
Well, and people sometimes tease me. It's like that I have some friends who kind of tease me that I don't like any movies because I had such a rough patch last year.
Yeah, well, last year was a different story.
But so I will always call it like I see it, but I always try to have humanity for the people involved, and to not, like, to keep it to the movie and not be insulting to the people.
Right. You don't have to be the Gordon Ramsay of Hallmark movies.
No, exactly. And particularly, I like to think that I champion. I like to think that I champion not only animation but also material made for women.
Yes.
That has typically usually been ignored or downplayed, by critics, and particularly in male media, and a chance to sort of champion things that are light and fun and positive, and of course, you get all that with Hallmark. But I certainly have plenty of Hallmark movies I don't like, but the people that just sort of dismiss the entire genre as having no value, I just don't understand how you can do that and be expected to be taken seriously as a critic. To me, that's crazy. But I'm glad that it comes off that way, because I really do try to be kind, even if I don't like something.
And like I always say, if there wasn't an audience for it, then it wouldn't exist. So, all right. Well, I had a fun time speaking with you about Sundance, about being a critic, and about just your appreciation of the arts. I would love for you to kind of share with my listeners and viewers where they can find your content, any social medias or plugs you've got that you'd like to share.
Yeah, you can find me at Rachel's Reviews all over the places. I have Rachel's Reviews Theater and rachelsreviews.net. And so you can find my reviews all over there. And then on YouTube, Rachel's Reviews. And then also the Hallmarkies podcast. We cover all things rom-com, holiday, and Hallmark over there. So, and my friends and I. So check it out.
Yeah, it's a fun time. And you're just so sweet. You're so cheerful in all of your content. It's fun. And that's why I said I try to train my algorithm to be more positive and not all these bitter, all movies suck these days, guys. Like I said, we got so many of those, and I try my hardest not to be one of them. So, well, thank you so much, Rachel, for joining me.
Thank you.
And you can find the links to all of her sites on the notes of this episode, both on YouTube and in the audio version. And you can find her in the Cultworthy Partners page of thecultworthy.com. So once again, thank you so much for joining me, Rachel, and I'll talk to you later.